Hey guys, it's Faye from SolarFlow and I am back with another video. Today's topic is a behind the veil energy read on Bryan Kohberger and the Idaho student murders. So if this sounds like an interesting topic to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. So first of all, just before we get started, I did something that I never ever do before with my videos. I actually researched a few of the details, but it was after I had done all of the channeling. I wanted to look up, first of all, the dates and also the victims' names so that I could accurately bring the information to you. And that's also going to bring me into my second point of housekeeping for anyone who is new here and not familiar with me. Hi, I'm Faye. I am an energy reader. I am a channeler, a medium, astral traveler, and remote viewer. And I do not ever research the topics that I discuss unless it is for specific details like this, because I never want to slow down the information as it comes in. And sometimes having too much information in advance or having preconceived ideas can actually slow down the flow of information. So that's why I was just sharing that point. Anything else that I'm going to share other than names and dates is either something that I had heard, something that had been mentioned to me, or it is the actual channeled information itself. So if that sounds good, welcome. I'm happy that you're here, and let's get started with it. So I do just want to also mention for anyone who is watching this video outside of the United States, that here in the USA, we do have something called a presumption of innocence. And that means that anyone who is charged with a crime is presumed to be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So this individual, Bryan Kohberger, was actually just arrested even under 2 weeks ago. So he has definitely not had his day in court. So according to the evidence, we cannot definitively say that he is the person who has committed the crimes. This is just the energy that I have picked up on him and the energy that I have picked up pertaining to the actual killing. Can I definitively say that it's him? No. I can't say that with any of the videos that I do, right? It's all kind of nebulous. We're dealing with energy here. But I am going to just talk about his specific energy. I'm also going to talk about the energy of the killings themselves and why one would choose to kill in such a manner. And then lastly, I'm also going to discuss what is the bigger picture or the purpose that these destructive characters serve in all of our lives. Why are they even here? What purpose do they serve? Okay, so let's dive in. I have a lot of notes and I'm probably going to be referring to my notebook on occasion. So before I get into it, let me just clarify what this is, because I think I actually had received some feedback from a few people on the video that I had done on the Watts family, that it was a case that they had not heard of or they were not familiar with. So before we get into it, I'm just going to kind of like lay out what it is that actually happened here for anyone who is not familiar or who has not heard of it. So on November 13th, 4 college students in Idaho were murdered. And the victims' names are Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Xana Kernodle, and Madison Mogen. They were killed somewhere around, the police believe, between 4 a.m. and about 4:30 a.m., something roughly around there. On December 30th, police had apprehended a suspect by the name of Bryan Kohberger, who they believe committed the crime. And we will talk about in the video how they came to identify him as the suspect, and what were some of the perhaps questionable things that he had done that actually had casted more suspicion on him as well. Okay, so now let's get into it. So my energy read when I was looking into Bryan is that he is someone that is very tightly wound up. He is stiff, he is ruthless, he is relentless. He is absolutely relentless and unforgiving. This is in his energy, okay? This is like his energetic blueprint. When he finds who or what he wants, that person will become the singular focus of his point of attention. And this actually came in as a visual for me, which was tunnel vision. So imagine, for example, if somebody was on a train and they were driving or they were passing through a tunnel. And while you're in a tunnel, it's so dark you can't see anything. So you can't see the walls around you, you can't see the roof, there's nothing that you can see. You can see one singularly point of focus. And that point of focus is the exit of the tunnel and the light that is coming in. That's all you can see. That's the one reference point. And this is very true for the way that his energy had come into me. That when he gets fixated on something, he has complete and utter tunnel vision in his ability to see that and that only. And with that came another visual representation as well, which was to show me how tightly wound up he is. And I was shown a mousetrap. So here's what a mousetrap is. It's like a piece of wood, and there's a trap laid on it. It's cheese or something like that. And then there's coils, like metal coils wrapped around it with a lever. So that way when the mouse comes and starts nibbling on the cheese, it triggers the coil, and then the metal will snap down and trap the mouse. So it was shown to me for Brian, as a reverse mouse trap. And what does that mean? That it's not him who is actually going to be trapped in the mouse trap. It's going to be his prey. And yes, that's the word that came in. So whoever is in his singularly point of focus, once he gets fixated on that person or that thing, the mouse trap will trap that thing. Okay, so let's start to explore a little bit more about Brian and his energy. So what was shown to me was that he's always been this way. He has always been intense, very, very intense energy. He's always been very, very tightly wound up and very in control of himself. And that he always knew that he was different because of this. So that when he, for example, would look at other people in the world, he would marvel at the relaxed and carefree, and one could even say the careless way in which they interacted with the world. And with this comment also came another visual representation, because sometimes this is where the energy comes in. It can be very metaphorical, it can be references to movies, it's anything that it can show me that my mind can start to make a connection onto. So this came with two different representations. So the first one was, if anyone has read the books or even seen the movies for the Twilight series, and there's this kind of recognition for anyone who's not familiar with it. There's a immortal vampire, his name is Edward, and his singularly point of focus, one could say, is a mortal by the name of Bella. And Bella was always 10 seconds away from like a catastrophe. She was very clumsy, and she was just the same kind of idea of like carefree, clueless, just going about her life. Even the fact that she was very attracted and drawn to this vampire, when he and his family would make other people uncomfortable, she was not made uncomfortable by him. So that's the first representation. That, if you will, all of the people out in the world that Brian would look at and marvel at, they were like Bellas to him. And he identified himself more as like an Edward. Now, here's the second visual representation. That imagine a pride of lion had escaped from a local zoo. And people near the zoo had no knowledge or no understanding that they had escaped. And they were just going about their business, living their best lives, running errands, having lunch together, meeting up with people, not having the understanding that this pride of lions had escaped and were now loose nearby. But this was not a careless kind of pride of lions. This was not they're just going to pounce on the first person that they see. These were a pride of lions that enjoyed the hunt. So they would track their prey, they would watch them, they would keep a careful eye on them. They were hunters. Okay, so this is just starting to kind of paint the picture of the way that Brian's energy had come into me. Now, even though he knew he was different, and he knew that the way in which he operated in the world was very, very atypical. So to that end, what was actually shown to me was that is why he actually chose what he was studying and what he was in, I think he was in maybe a master's or a PhD program. But what he chose to study was intentional on his part. So I believe he had either studied forensic psychology or criminal justice or criminology. And this was not a casual study for him. This was where he really devoted himself to it, where he had gotten first his college degree. Then he had also, I think, obtained a master's degree. And I believe, if memory serves correct, he had finished his first semester of a PhD as well. So this is someone who was really, really devoting himself to the academic pursuits of understanding the criminal mind or criminality. And in addition to that, he was also, I think, had interned for a renowned forensic psychologist who had studied, I believe, or maybe even had worked with, I'm not entirely sure, a different serial killer by the name of BTK. And for anyone who's not familiar with who BTK was, because there's actually some interesting similarities here, even though they're very, very different, there's interesting similarities here that I'm going to touch upon. So BTK was a prolific serial killer, and I think he had killed a number of victims over like a 20-year period. And BTK stood for bound, torture, and kill. And while the information of BTK was starting to come into me, it was also, I got a very interesting word with it: artistry. Now, this is not my word. This is not the way that I would choose to look at a prolific serial killer. But from the point of view, from the perspective of the actual BTK killer himself, he was looking at the crimes that he was committing with a sense of artistry. So to him, the killing was almost secondary. What really kind of jazzed him up was the artistry of the way in which he was binding his victims and the manner in which they were being tortured prior to them being killed. Now, so this forensic psychologist who had studied the BTK killer, Brian was also interning for her, or had interned for her in the past. Now, what's kind of notable about these two was that there's a high level of patience, because the BTK killer was not a, I think the terminology they would use is a spree killer. He was not a disorganized spree killer. And a spree killer is kind of like what you would see in the shootings that go on in schools, where someone has access to a gun, they're just on a rampage, they are not particular about their victims, they just want to cause mass mayhem and destruction because that is a reflection of their own internal state, and they want others to feel the way that they are feeling. That's not BTK, and that was not Bryan Kohberger. There was a level of discernment, right? So they were very particular about who the kind of victim was, and they could have a high level of patience, because BTK could go many, many years in between the killings. And he would also kind of profile, or once a victim would come onto his radar, he would spend a fair amount of time fantasizing before he would actually act on it and before he would actually take them into his custody. And that is similar to what Bryan Kohberger had done as well. My understanding that he had passed by the homes of the victims a number of times. I believe it was somewhere between 10 and 15 times in the months prior to the murder. So starting all the way back in August, which was 3 months prior to the actual murders themselves, he had been driving by the homes. So this is as well showing, and it's reflecting a high level of patience that he had. Also not a spree killer. So a few other interesting details that had come in about Bryan Kohberger. So I'm just going to go back for a second and touch upon the point of him really dedicating himself to the understanding and the pursuit of these criminality and criminal procedures, and that was in an effort to understand himself. It was not that he himself thought there was anything wrong with him, but it was just more this recognition and understanding that he was different, and he wanted to understand himself. And that's why he devoted himself so fully and thoroughly to this course of academia. Now, interestingly, or one could even say ironically enough, he also reached out at some point to the police department that is now investigating these crimes, and he had wanted to work with them in the, one could say, what would happen after a crime was committed, in the, I guess, maybe the collection of the evidence or the application of the forensic sciences towards trying to establish who was the actual perpetrator of a crime. Now, since I think this question might actually come out, I'm going to get out ahead of it. I'm going to say that no, this was not him working with, first of all, this forensic psychologist, or him wanting to work with the actual police station. This was not him wanting to be around the other people and pulling the wool over their eyes, so to say. So it wasn't like with any deceptive intention on his part, like, I wonder if I can be around these people and they wouldn't even pick up and notice if there is anything different with me. This was honestly, or at least in the energy that came in for me, this was really in his wanting to be around, first of all, with the police department. It was for him to gain an understanding of what the police methodologies actually are, so that he could arm himself with it in evading any sort of detection. I think it's actually come out in the media that he was wearing gloves out in public, or I think he was even maybe wearing gloves like when he would pump gas in a gas station, because that was an attempt on his part to try to evade detection. Him wanting to work with this forensic psychologist was also him wanting to be around people that were prestigious in the field and had the most understanding of this, so that he could try to acquire as much information about himself as well. Okay, now let's go back to this ability that he had to be so patient. And with it, I'm going to say that a few other interesting terms came in to describe him. So first of all, he is far from stupid. He is not a stupid individual at all. He is cunning, and with the word cunning came another word as well, which is diabolically intelligent. Now, and there was something about him while I was actually looking into his energy that gave me Ted Bundy vibes. And for anyone who's not familiar with Ted Bundy is another serial killer that had been very prolific in the early 80s, and he had killed, by our estimations, or his own admission, even though he had said something that was a little bit maybe nebulous, but we have an understanding he had killed somewhere around maybe 38 to 40 women. And Ted Bundy was also incredibly smart. And at his trial, he actually chose to represent himself. The judge that was in his trial had actually said to him he would have made a fierce attorney. So very, very intelligent. And Bryan Kohberger is giving me very much the same kind of energetic vibes with somebody like a Ted Bundy. Now, I'm also going to say with Bryan Kohberger, the tunnel vision that he had was a bit kind of like an OCD, like an obsessive compulsion, or it was a compulsion of some kind. Which was that, again, when he would get somebody into his, the tunnel vision, that would manifest as a itch. But this was not any ordinary itch. This was not an itch that could be satiated with a normal scratch. The only thing that could satiate this compulsion that he had was seeing through to the completion of the end of the fantasy that he had. And that is also why he was being so patient. The time that it took him, the months that he was going and he was like checking out the house, or he was checking out the inhabitants of the home, was kind of like foreplay for him. It was deliberate, intentional, controlled foreplay where he wanted to postpone the delay of gratification as much as he could. And the reason that he was doing that was because of the fact that if he would see it through in his fantasies, it would lose the potency quicker. And he wanted to delay it as much as he could. So let's talk a little bit about what this idea of it being foreplay was for him. So foreplay is this buildup of tension, usually of a sexual nature, before two people engage in any sort of a sexual act. So it's to heighten the arousal, and it's to prolong or delay the gratification that comes out of it. And that is very much the way that it was for Bryan Kohberger. So the fantasizing for him of the completion, or interestingly enough, another word just came in, consummation. So which is, again, I think, driving home the point of this being akin to a sexual nature. Because what is consummation? It's where two people would, for example, consummate a sexual act. So this was very much akin to a sexual fantasy for him. And I would even go so far as to say that when he would fantasize about the finality, or him coming to the ultimate conclusion, or the consummation of this fantasy, which was the ultimate killing, he would experience a release that was akin to a sexual release. But it was not a physical release the way an orgasm is. It was an energetic release. And in those times that he would see through to the end of the fantasy, the logical conclusion for him anyway of what he wanted to have done or what he wanted to do, he would get a glimpse in those moments of how it felt to be a regular person. That carefree, relaxed, free-flowing kind of energy. But this was a very disoriented feeling for him, and he didn't actually enjoy being there because his energetic blueprint was a very, very wound up, tightly coiled, and I would even say not blood boiling, but that similar to a live wire, simmering just underneath the surface of his skin was this like almost electric pulse. So he is someone that is very used to being in control. So for him to have these feelings of that free flow of energy and that relaxed, careless nature, for him is actually very uncomfortable. So that's why he was kind of prolonging the fantasy as long as he could, prolonging the delay of gratification as long as he could, so that way he wouldn't have to see it through to the completion of the fantasy where it would be a very uncomfortable feeling for him. He really, really liked the buildup of it. He really liked the foreplay that was involved in it. Okay, and this, the fantasy aspect, the foreplay aspect was incredibly potent for him. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how can we best kind of skirt the subject without saying that this was him who did it, without saying it was him to do it? I'm going to say that, okay, there was a few anomalies, or not anomalies, there was a few things that really showed that perhaps if it was him, there was a level of thought that was put into it, which is as follows. That how were the police able to identify the fact that he had been in the neighborhood of the home these maybe 15 times prior to the killing? And that was because of the location services that are on a telephone, where they can look at what are the towers that are picking up the cell phone service, and then they can kind of like triangulate the points and they can identify where somebody had been. So they were able to see that he had been there on a number of occasions, you know, prior to the killing, which was in November, so starting from about August on. But interestingly enough, on the night of the murder, he, from about, I don't remember what time, 2 to let's say about 4:30 a.m., something about that, his phone, they could not triangulate the exact location of his phone. So that would indicate that his phone was either in airplane mode or his phone was off. So that's kind of like one thing that reflects this idea of trying to evade detection. Now, I'm also going to say that if it was him who had done this, his energy afterwards was, he felt high, not like a drug high, an energetic kind of a high. Imagine kind of like the jittery way in which one might feel if they had consumed too much coffee too early on in the day. That is the way that his energy was coming through after the completion of these crimes, one would say. So there was so much anticipation, there was so much buildup, there was this delay in gratification, that once it had actually been done, it was a release of energy on his part. So he was no longer aching about it, fantasizing, dreaming. He had consummated it after this very, very long, drawn out, prolonged period of foreplay for him. And after it was done, he felt powerful. He felt capable. He felt more like himself than he had ever felt before. And I think that that's what he had always been seeking. He had always been seeking feeling like himself, feeling accepted for who he was, feeling acknowledged, feeling seen by himself, where he no longer felt like he was an outsider, he felt like he was fully embodied in himself. And he had this sense of power that, excuse me, whereas before he had felt powerless, he now felt powerful. Whereas before he felt lost, he now felt found to himself. Now, let's talk a little bit about the way in which the killings were done, the way in which the murders were carried out, because that within itself is also very notable. What's notable about it is the act of stabbing people repetitively over and over again, and this is not just one person, this is 4 people. It's very physical. It's very visceral. It's very full of rage. So again, this is not a crime of opportunity. This is not a disorganized spree killer. This is not somebody who is not discerning or doesn't care. So this somehow reflects a personal nature to the crimes, to the victims, and how the murders were committed. We're going to talk about that. So first of all, I'm not sure which of the victims it was. I had seen a picture, and as soon as I saw a picture of one of them, that immediately came in as the point of focus for Brian. That was the end point, the light coming into the tunnel, who he had fixated all of his attention onto. So he had first seen one of the victims first, and then started to kind of build out this idea of who her friends, who her associates were, who she lived with, and that led to the killing of some of the other housemates as well. because these were four students that actually lived in housing together. But in addition to that, there were, I believe, two other people in the home that were not actually killed. And what is very interesting about that, and which kind of, when I was looking into it, I was like, yeah, that makes actually perfect sense, following the same kind of idea of the tunnel vision, which is that it came out recently that one of the other people who lived in the home, I believe she had said she had opened her door, or I'm not exactly sure, she had been in the hallway or something, and she had seen someone in the home wearing a ski mask. And after she had seen him, she had gone back into her room and she had locked the door. So I actually do believe that Brian was aware of this person, but because he had such extreme tunnel vision, this person was blocked out, so to say. So again, following this idea of what is the point of focus, what is the light coming in through the tunnel, and not having the ability to see anything else that was in the tunnel, and seeing this person was very much being blocked out of a point of focus. So he, I believe, was on some level aware that there was another person there, but they were not his point of focus the way these four victims were. So again, let's go back to this visceral nature in the rageful way and how he chose to actually kill them. And what came in for me when I was looking at the energy of this is that by killing them, first of all, the killing of them alone, and in his singular point of focus having been one of the girls, I don't know what her name was, but it was the blonde-haired girl. So she was kind of like the epitome of the kind of person that would reject him. So by killing her and her friends, it was killing or neutralizing the potential threat to him and to his ego. Because whereas he was understanding himself to be different, and understanding himself to be intense, and understanding himself to be a social outlier, her and her friends were the epitome of everything that he was not. They were popular, they had friends, they were carefree, they were vibrant, they were effervescent with their energy and with their energetic blueprint. So killing them was very much personal for him, where it was the neutralizing the threat to his anyone who could potentially reject him. And it was also killing the diametrically opposed kind of person to who he actually was. It was killing the kind of people that he knew he could never actually be with. And again, this is not a stupid person. This is someone who has actual self-knowledge in himself. So he was, whereas they were insiders, they were popular, they had friends, he was the outsider. So he was killing the potential for rejection, okay? Now, what also came up for me was the very visceral, rage-filled way in which he killed them, which is, again, this was using his own hands. This was not like, I don't care who I'm going to kill, I just have a gun. This was directed towards these specific people. And what came through is that this was, in a way, a replacement for sex. And what I mean to say by that is, whereas sex includes penetration, right? It's a penetration of a phallus into a woman, or it's the penetration of a man's penis into a woman's body part. This also included a penetration. But this was a penetration of a knife into flesh, over and over and over again. So this was a replacement energetically for sex. And here's another interesting thing that came in, which is where sex is an energetic co-mingling of two participants. This killing is an energetic dominance of the victims. So Brian Kohberger is not somebody that wanted to energetically commingle with another person. He did not want to be vulnerable. He did not want to open up the dark recesses of his soul. He wanted to completely dominate energetically the victims. So his energy is all about dominance, power, and control. And in this action, he had the ultimate control over their lives, and that made him feel powerful. And what also came in for him, before we move on to what is the purpose of these kind of destructive forces in the world? What also came in for him is now that what happens to him now, it actually doesn't even matter. Whether he spends the rest of his life in prison or he gets convicted and is put on death row, where he'll probably spend about 15 years on death row because there's a lot of appeals that come along with it. Whatever happens to him now, it actually doesn't even matter. And it doesn't matter because he has the one thing that nobody can take away from him, which is the memories that he has of the murders. No one can take that away from him. So whether he lives, whether he dies, he will always have that with him, and that will always forever continue to replace sex for him. Which is not to say that he doesn't necessarily have, it's not to say that he's asexual, or it's not to even say that he doesn't have the same kind of needs that one might have in the release that they would feel through an actual physical orgasm. It's to say that for him, the memory of this is something that he will always have, and that is something that cannot be taken away from him. So he needs for nothing and he wants for nothing. He has this. Now, let's kind of also talk about what is the bigger picture or the purpose that these destructive, malignant forces serve in the world. Because they do serve one. And while I was kind of looking at it, I was looking at, one could say, anomalies. And what I mean by that is there are genetic anomalies that can occur in nature. A genetic anomaly that can occur in a person is we can first of all have like a hermaphrodite, which is someone that has both female and male genitalia. We have albinos. Albinos that are people that are have very, very low melanin in their skin and no pigmentation in their hair. So their skin is quite pale, all their hair is quite pale. We even have albino animals that occur naturally in nature. There are albino, I think like crocodiles or what are the other ones? I forget. So there are these kinds of anomalies that one could say that are naturally occurring in nature. So are they anomalies or do they serve a bigger picture? And I'm going to say that they are a piece of a puzzle in a much larger picture. And that is the much larger picture of why we are actually here. And I promise I'm going to tie it all together. So just kind of follow the thread of where I'm going with this. Earth is the wild, wild west. And the way that it is spoken about for other souls that have completed their karmic loop and their karmic incarnations here, they go on from here and they're telling other souls in other parts of the universe that Earth place, it's off the fucking chains. I had many different lifetimes, and in my different lifetimes, my memories was wiped, and I didn't remember why I was coming back, or what I was coming back for, or what I had to make restitution for. That place is so wild. And we have like bodies, because in other places, it's just souls. It's just pure energy. There's no bodies. So Earth is the wild fucking west. And once when I was looking into Earth, it was actually shown to me that souls that are here, that choose to incarnate, are really excited about it. So we're not kind of like these hapless victims that get shoved into bodies and we're sent down here and it's like, go forth and you will suffer. No. What is Earth if not a place to have experiences? different kinds of experiences that we would have no place else. Because like I said, other places, there are no bodies. It's just souls, or it's pure energy. And the energy here on Earth is so incredibly dense. And part of that is because we have bodies. And our bodies are dense as well. There's many, many different layers that comprise a human body. And that is our physical protection between us and the outside world. But the outside world, Earth here as well, it's kind of like, we're used to it at this point because we've had many incarnations. But if anyone else would come here for the first time without a body, just in their pure energetic expression of themselves, it would feel like they are navigating through quicksand. So Earth is where we souls choose to come to have the experiences that we would have no place else. And what creates these different kinds of experiences? Part of it are our own actions, our own choices, our own free will. It's the contrast that is created through the environment that we live in and through the relationships that we have with other people. But it's also the introduction of these consciously compromised individuals. And think about in your own life and in your own experiences, if you have ever had an encounter with a difficult person, if you have ever had an encounter with a dangerous person, with a violent person, with an abusive person, with a person that, due to your interactions with them, you experience the most soul growth because of it. And that is why these people exist on the Earth plane. They are creating contrast in which our soul can have different kinds of experiences. And I'm going to give you a few examples of that. So, for example, here in LA, and probably where you live as well, we have going on here what's called smash and grabs. Smash and grabs are basically where a couple of people will get together and they'll wear, maybe like masks of some kind. They will either, so this is a notable thing that actually happened here at a Chanel store, where they had crashed their car into the glass front of the Chanel store, had gone in, had made off with like $150,000 worth of stolen merchandise. That's contrast. That is put forth on the world's stage for people to see, so we can make choices in our own life. Do we want to continue to live in integrity and go to jobs and try to earn money? Or do we want to get a band of our friends together and do some smash and grabs too? Imagine there's a member of Congress. They go to Washington, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, with the best intentions. But they're seeing all around them other congressmen are corrupted. And they're getting really, really rich off of their corruption as well. So is that congressman going to continue to live with their own personal integrity? Or are they as well going to make the choice to become corrupt as well? Because here on Earth, free will reigns supreme. This is where our souls come to have experiences we wouldn't have anywhere else. The introduction of these people into the world is to create contrast in which we can decide where on the spectrum do we want to fall. And as I was receiving this information, another interesting thing had come in as well. And this was shown to me as a film, a movie. And the movie is called Seven. And this is a movie that was made maybe somewhere around 20 years ago. And this was a film with Brad Pitt. And it was actually a pretty big cast. I forget who it was. Brad Pitt and two other big name celebrities. I think one was Kevin Spacey. I forgot who the other one was. But anyway, the Brad Pitt character was a police officer or a police detective. And what had happened in this film was that there was a perpetrator who was staging different events around him that were playing out the 7 deadly sins. And I don't remember what they are, and I'm not going to even try to pretend it. But the final scene in the film, which I'm going to have to give it away for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's worth it, I promise, because it really does kind of illustrate the point here. The final scene is where the Brad Pitt character comes to understand that his wife was killed. And he has a choice to kill the perpetrator who had killed his wife, or to allow the justice system to do what it's supposed to do. And that was this perpetrator's final point that he was trying to prove. The 7 deadly sins, murder being one of them. So this is, and yes, I do understand, of course, that this is a movie, but it serves as an illustrative point, which is, where have things perhaps happened in our own life where we wanted to become vigilantes? Where have things happened in our own life, perhaps, where we have experienced the eroding of our own personal integrity? Where have things happened in our own life where we made questionable choices? That is the point of our being here, to have this introduction of contrast so that we can explore different parts of ourselves in conjunction through those different kinds of experiences. It is to lead to further soul's growth on our part, which can be, I want to just recognize, a hard pill to swallow, especially if we want to live in a low vibration. And a low vibration is any time that we are living in a state of victimhood, any time that we are living in fear. Those are low vibrations. What is a high vibration is when we make choices that are not based in fear, but are based in love, where we are showing up fully as ourselves and not living in a state of victimhood. Why do these things always happen to me? Can easily be reframed as, why are these things happening for me? And what am I meant to learn and transcend from them? So I'm going to start to wrap this up with another interesting thing that had come in, which was the question of, when will these things start to, when will we not start to see these horrific, somewhat seemingly things playing out on the world stage? Which is a really good question, and that's why I kind of want to touch on it. So it was shown to me that, first of all, as we continue in our own personal evolution, where we continue to make choices based in love and in a higher vibration, and not choices that are made out of fear, it will feel less and less comfortable for us to observe these things playing out in the world, where we may choose to not want to watch the news. We may choose to then say to people who are bringing up uncomfortable topics for us, you know what, this is something that just doesn't feel good for me. I don't want to discuss it. And to protect our own personal energy with the most paramount of importance. And live in our own energetic bubble, one could say. So these things will, here, before we talk about it on the macro, which is the entire world stage, let's talk about it with our own individual selves, which is the more and more that we are choosing to live in the high vibration, to make high vibration choices, these darker entities or the darker energies of these people will no longer be a vibrational match for us and our energy. So if you are in an energetically compromised situation and you're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to get out of this, instead of focusing on the external circumstances, focus on the internal, which is your own personal energy and your own personal vibration. Because once we bring our own personal energy and vibration up, the things that are low energy are no longer a vibrational match with us, and they have no choice but to fall away. So as more and more of us are making these choices and beginning to ascend, and then we become this beacon of light to other people that are around us, where we can show them the way, where we can have these conversations, where we're normalizing talking about vibrations and energy and high vibration and making different choices and not living in a fear-based vibration or a victim-based vibration, but a personal accountability vibration, where we are personally accountable for our own energy and our own vibration. So as more and more of us are continuing to wake up, and as more and more of us are continuing to ascend, these lower, darker, energetic experiences are not going to have anywhere to go. And they're going to have to start to fall away because they will not be in an energetic match with us any longer. So I think that's a great place to end the video. And I'm going to end the video with what I always say, which I think also really nicely kind of ties in with what I was just sharing with us here. I always end my videos by saying, stay in the high vibration. So stay in your own personal high vibration so that these dark entities and dark energies will not be an energetic match for you any longer. So, as always, guys, I hope that this video has been interesting or informative or thought-provoking in some way. If not, please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And as always, stay in the high vibration.